Hey friends, well it seems we have some interesting news today. I could say breaking news, I could say bombshell, but obviously I won't, because it's neither. This report is probably relevant or important to some, but for the most part, it doesn't really matter because, well, Chris Christie doesn't really matter. But the reports are today that Chris Christie has finally decided to remove himself from the process. Chris Christie is reportedly pulling out of the Republican presidential nomination process. He's packing it all up, he's closing up shop, as it seems his attempt has failed. And of course, I'm not referring to his attempt of becoming president, but rather his attempt to stop Donald Trump as the main RNC establishment saboteur candidate in this year's election. Let's have a conversation pretty much about exactly that. Chris Christie is done, we got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so here's the article from Mediaite. They write, breaking, I write, inevitable. Chris Christie reportedly dropping out of 2024 race. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is expected to drop out of the 2024 presidential race according to a report. Journalist Mark Halperin broke the news on his Substack after speaking with two anonymous sources. Halperin wrote that the Christie campaign was expected to make an announcement at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so it's likely that when you're watching this video he already dropped out, but Christie is not expected to immediately announce an endorsement. Of course he wouldn't, the absolute clown. Let's not forget that he's the only person on the debate stage that refused to endorse Donald Trump or support Donald Trump if he failed to topple him. And of course, here's where we get to the meat and potatoes of this whole topic. We're talking about who Chris Christie really is. And it's the same word that I always use to describe these RNC plants. They're saboteurs, just like Lindsey Graham, just like Liz Cheney. They're all uniparty politicians, including Mitch McConnell and the rest of them. It's honestly the only proper way to describe Chris Christie's campaign. I mean, even CNN was able to admit it.
No one else in the race is going to take on Trump as head-on, as we've seen Chris Christie willing to do so. We have seen others who have kind of attacked Trump. Ron DeSantis has been starting to be a little bit more fierce in his attacks toward Trump. Asa Hutchinson has been, but Asa Hutchinson has also taken the debate pledge and said that he would support Donald Trump candidacy. I don't know if you're going to see Chris Christie take that same agreement, and it's clear that his candidacy seems to be a kamikaze candidacy, that he wants to try to take down Donald Trump, and he kind of knows that his chances at...
You think that?
I believe that. I think that he knows that he's unpopular with voters and that he is just going to be that disruptor candidate who is going to create a lane potentially for another candidate. I have a hard time taking his candidacy seriously, maybe just because he's flip-flopped so much on his support for Trump.
Totally fair.
You know, Chris Christie loves to say that he's running for the American people. The only thing that changed is Donald Trump. Chris Christie woke up after 2020 and realized that Donald Trump was an existential threat to the nation. I mean, that's what he tells the news organizations that he does his little fluff piece interviews with.
Some voters might be already asking you were with Trump. They may even say you were sucking up to Trump. What do you say to them?
Just what I just said to you. In fact, it did happen in one of my early town halls up there. And I said to the guy, look, I made a mistake.
It was a mistake.
But I'm telling you why I did what I did at the time.
What about voters who have a little skepticism about how you've been anti-Trump, with Trump, anti-Trump?
I'm a good Republican, and it was clear to me Donald Trump was going to be the nominee. And at that time, I had a relationship with him for 15 years. And I wanted to make him the best candidate, and if he won, the best president he could be. And I make no apologies for that. And I did the very best I could for 4 years. And he failed me, and he failed the country.
The question lingers over your campaign among some Republicans. Are you a flip-flopper?
No. Trump abandoned me. I'm no different today than I was when I supported him in 2016. He's the one who kept classified documents against the law, that lied to his lawyers and lied to the government. I had nothing to do with any of that. He did.
But the reality, I think, is quite the opposite. The only reason Chris Christie threw Trump under the bus post-2020 is because he no longer had to show loyalty. From his view, at that point, Trump was damaged goods, and so he was tasked with the job of turning on Trump, just like Nikki Haley was, just like Lindsey Graham was. And the funny thing is here, the narrative around Chris Christie dropping out of the race is that Chris just couldn't get the momentum and so he decided to pull out. Well, apparently that's not at all what actually is happening. Again, Chris Christie doesn't make these decisions on his own, they are made for him and he simply follows the orders. Literally yesterday and the day before I was reading articles suggesting that a certain element of the Republican Party was frustrated with Chris Christie as he was supposedly helping Donald Trump by staying in the race. New Hampshire governor calls out Chris Christie for, quote, helping Trump by staying in race. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu called out Republican presidential candidate and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie for bolstering former President Donald Trump's standing in the GOP primary, telling Real Clear Politics that Chris knows he can't win. Well, obviously, everyone knows that. That was never the intention. Chris Christie entered the race with the stated intention of denying Trump the nomination after playing a key role in handing him it back in 2016, but Christie is no longer qualifying for debates and has a dismal approval rating among Republican voters, even in New Hampshire, the state in which Chris Christie performs the best. His approval rating is underwater by 40 points. A vote for Chris Christie is a vote for Donald Trump. There's no question about it, said Sununu during an interview with Philip Wegman. If Christie stays in the race, he helps Trump win. That's it. He's helping Trump. Trump wants Christie in the race, continued Sununu. We get it. You literally said the same thing 3 times. I know that's not what Chris's original strategy was, but again, the strategy has kind of come to an end. And so there you have it. Chris Christie is now supposedly pulling out of the presidential race because of his underwater approval rating and the fact that he can no longer qualify for debates, but obviously that isn't the case at all. Chris Christie is now being told to pull out because Nikki Haley is gaining some ground in the state of New Hampshire by appealing to Democrats, and Christie's in the way of potentially topping Donald Trump in the state, which of course they would love, because if they can somehow make it to where Donald Trump loses to Nikki Haley in New Hampshire early on, they believe that they can start spinning the narrative that Donald Trump is unelectable and then other states will follow. That seems to be the Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley thought process in New Hampshire and Iowa respectively, that if they can just pull off an upset there, the whole Trump image will start to topple. Not exactly sure how realistic that is, especially with Iowa as a strategic pick, considering Trump has essentially doubled his support there, mostly pulling evangelical voters onto his side.
Pick your adjective, dramatic turnaround, I'll say, since 2016 in terms of where Trump stands with evangelicals. We've seen this nationally, and I think it's the biggest story in Iowa. Just as a refresher, 8 years ago, Iowa caucuses, first time in the 2016, first contest of the 2016 process. Remember, Trump lost Iowa. He came in second to Ted Cruz. He barely held off Marco Rubio for third place. Remember, there were a couple days there after Iowa in 2016. People were saying, hey, maybe this Trump thing will all fall apart. He ended up winning New Hampshire, turning it around. But the reason, the overriding reason that Donald Trump lost Iowa in 2016 is right here. This is the exit poll from the caucuses. This is the evangelical vote. About 64% of the Iowa Republican electorate in 2016 was evangelical. And look, Ted Cruz won it. He won it by double digits, 34-22 over Donald Trump. So Cruz with a double-digit win among evangelicals. There was a lot of resistance, a lot of skepticism. Trump had some support with evangelicals, but Cruz was the candidate of the evangelicals in Iowa in 2016, and he won the state. So that was 2016. Our most recent NBC News Des Moines Register poll out of Iowa. This is about a month old, but this is what we've been seeing all year. Among evangelicals, look at the turnaround. Trump, who was losing by 12 to Ted Cruz, now with an outright majority, 51% of the evangelical vote, basically 2-1 over his nearest foe.
And so the sabotage scheming behind the scenes continues. It's so obvious and clear what's been going on. From that first or second debate where I made the video covering this moment right here.
I think that we have to put the interests of Americans first. Secure our own border instead of somebody else's.
He was referring.
And the reality is,
it was obvious before then, but at that point it was extremely obvious that there was some sort of plot that Fox News and probably every other rhino establishment organization was involved in to continuously call on Chris Christie to slam Vivek, to slam Donald Trump in an attempt to get rid of him and regain establishment control over the party. And now supposedly Chris Christie has a big announcement. I promise you Chris Christie's big announcement won't be him endorsing Donald Trump. He's probably going to be endorsing Nikki Haley or something. Huge breaking bombshell news. Chris Christie, literal nobody running for the Republican nomination by appealing to Democrats, endorses Republican Nikki Haley Clinton for president. Wow, what a surprise. Shocking. I'm so shocked. It's going to be something stupid like that because obviously that's this guy's role. Everyone knows it. CNN knows it. He knows it. I mean, he's even admitted it at some points that the only reason he's running is to go after Donald Trump. I mean, what an absolute clown show where you have your own party working against the will of their own voters actively attempting to sabotage a presidential election for their own party during one of the most important election cycles ever. I mean, we're talking about potentially stopping a second Joe Biden term, stopping disaster, standing in the way of disaster. It's hard for me to reconcile with that notion. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around this nonsense. But that's exactly what it is, and that's exactly what this Chris Christie supposedly dropping out story is about. He's attempting to bolster Nikki Haley's numbers in New Hampshire by making a whole thing about it. Well, I guess back to normal. Chris Christie is going to revert to being probably a CNN and MSNBC contributor, warning us about the existential threat that Donald Trump is actively campaigning for Joe Biden. And this clown supposedly has an R next to his name. What a farce. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.